Good afternoon. I'm Cindy Hall, President of Women's Policy, Inc. Welcome to this afternoon's event celebrating the FDA Office of Women's Health on 20 years of protecting and advancing the health of women. Women's Policy, Inc., or WPI, as most of you know, is a nonpartisan, nonprofit public policy organization. Our key mission is to help ensure that policymakers make the most informed decisions on key women's issues, both global and domestic. And we work very closely with the members and staff of the Bipartisan Congressional Caucus for Women's Issues. And I would like to thank our congressional briefing co-sponsors, Congresswomen Jamie Herrera Butler and Donna F. Edwards. They're the co-chairs of the Women's Caucus. Congresswomen Kristi Noem and Doris O. Matsui, vice chairs of the Women's Caucus. And Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler and Lois Capps, co-chairs of the Women's Health Task Force of the Women's Caucus. This is the fifth event in a Women's Health series we are sponsoring over several years, made possible with the support of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. We thank the Foundation for its support and its work to improve the health and health care of all Americans. And representing the Foundation today is Dr. David Colby, Vice President of Policy, and Kim Elliott, Director of Policy Outreach. We are very privileged to have this opportunity to sponsor this important celebration and to host such an esteemed panel, Dr. Margaret Hamburg, the Commissioner of Food and Drugs, and Marcia Henderson, Assistant Commissioner for Women's Health at the FDA Office of Women's Health, and Ambassador Connie Morella, who everyone also knows, I know, and needs no introduction. All four of the former directors of the Office of Women's Health are here today. Founding Director, Dr. Ruth Merkatz, Audrey Shepard, Dr. Susan Wood, and Dr. Kathleen Ewell. Our thanks to each of them for their important contributions to the FDA office over many years. I would also like to acknowledge several other attendees. Dr. Nancy Lee, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Health, Women's Health, and Director of the Office on Women's Health at HHS. Dr. Janine Clayton, Director of the Office of Research on Women's Health and Associate Director for Research on Women's Health at NIH. Dr. Vivian Pinn, the first and longtime Director of the Office of Research on Women's Health and Associate Director of Research for Research on Women's Health at NIH. I already have mentioned Ambassador Morella. Lorraine Cole, Director of the Office of Minority and Women Inclusion at the Department of Treasury, who also chairs our Board of Directors and has led several women's health organizations. I know many of you know this. Lastly, there are a number of advocates for women's health attending today. Many of you have partnered with the office or have supported its work over the years. I would like to specifically acknowledge the Society for Women's Health Research. Phyllis Greenberger, the Society's president and CEO, led the nonprofit advocacy effort on behalf of the office since the very beginning. And Martha Nolan, Vice President for Public Policy, has also played a very big role over the years. Others I know in this audience have worked hard over many years to ensure the office's continued health and funding. Too many to point out today. To each of you, thank you. We will be live tweeting during this event, and we encourage you and others to please do so. The hashtag is WPI Health. The FDA Office of Women's Health has had many congressional champions, particularly among the women senators and members over the years. 20 years ago, former Senator Olympia Snowe then serving in the House, introduced the Women's Health Office Act, legislation to permanently establish the FDA Office of Women's Health and 4 other federal agency offices, and continued to sponsor the bill with Senator Barbara Mikulski until it finally became law as a provision of the Affordable Care Act in 2010. When Senator Snowe was elected to the Senate, Congresswoman Connie Morella became the House sponsor of the Women's Health Office Act. Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney later became the House sponsor after Connie left Congress, joined by then Congresswoman Deborah Price. Over the past 20 years, other women senators and members worked hard to ensure adequate funding for the office, including Senator Mikulski, who chairs the Senate Appropriations Committee, Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, who both chaired and served as ranking member of the subcommittee with jurisdiction over FDA up until the last Congress, and Nita Lowey, ranking member of the House Appropriations Committee. And I want to note, please notice these women in positions of power. This was not true 20 years ago. So the office has had many champions over the years, and it has been supported by a bipartisan group of women senators and House members. It really is quite impressive. So without any further ado, I'm very happy. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce Dr. Margaret Hamburg, Commissioner of Food and Drugs. As the top official at the FDA, Dr. Hamburg is committed to strengthening programs and policies that enable the agency to carry out its fundamental mission to protect and promote the public health. Only the second woman ever to serve as commissioner, Dr. Hamburg provided leadership for the implementation of 3 groundbreaking measures: the Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act, a 2009 law that gives FDA the authority to regulate the manufacture, distribution, and marketing of tobacco products, the Food Safety Modernization Act of 2011, which changed the focus of food safety measures from responding to foodborne outbreaks of illness to preventing them, and a thorough review of the system for evaluation and approval of medical devices. Commissioner Hamburg.
Well, thank you so much. So many friends and colleagues in the audience, so many important supporters of women's health, and so many important friends and supporters of our work at the FDA. I certainly want to thank you, Cindy, for the wonderful introduction of today's event, but also for making it possible and having the organizational foresight to bring us all together here this morning to celebrate what is a very important event. You can clap for yourself. I mean, one thing women sometimes don't do is take enough credit when credit is due. So I think it's very, very appropriate. We also want to thank, of course, the Congressional Women's Caucus for all that they've done. And I won't reiterate the introductions and the acknowledgments of all the distinguished people here with us today, and of course our important forebearers in terms of the leadership of the Office of Women's Health. Each and every one of you made important and enduring contributions, and we're deeply appreciative of the leadership, the vision, and the hard work that you brought to your tasks. And of course, I do really want to thank Senator Olympia Snowe and Congresswoman Connie Morella for the leadership and vision and hard work that they brought to the early work that made the Office of Women's Health real. And we sure miss you in Congress today. Luckily, you helped train and foster a place for women in leadership roles today, and they continue to be supportive and work with us in critical ways, including, of course, Senator Mikulski and Representatives Carolyn Maloney, Rosa DeLauro, and Nita Lowey, who you mentioned, and so many others, Senator Stabenow and Elizabeth Warren, Representatives Louise Slaughter, Louise Capps, Donna Christensen, and Pat Schroeder have all been very important in championing our work, and that's only a partial list. You mentioned some others, and one of the good things is that today there are almost too many to remember and mention in a setting like this, but we still need more. I also want to thank Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for sponsoring today's event and all the good work that is done to advance health and prevent disease in this country, including a special focus on women and their needs. 20 years is a pretty long time. For some of us, the years seem to be going faster than they used to. But whether it seems a short moment in time or an eternity, a lot has changed over the 20 years. Someone was mentioning to me this morning that it was actually 20 years ago that the first smartphone came into the marketplace. It was called IBM Simon. I don't even remember IBM Simon, but think how that one arena of life and society has changed over time. And certainly for the Office of Women's Health and the FDA and medicine and public health more broadly, the progress has been enormous. And I, of course, want to focus in now on the progress that has occurred to advance the health of women. 20 years ago, Congress established the Office of Women's Health for two purposes. First, to protect and advance the health of women through policy, science, and outreach. And second, to advocate for the participation of women in clinical trials and really to reiterate the importance of thinking about critical subgroups and subpopulation analyses in research that is done. And I do think that the results of that early vision and the work that has been done is really quite impressive. Since its inception, the Office of Women's Health has supported research that helps to identify and understand sex differences in the safety and efficacy of FDA-regulated products. The Office of Women's Health Research Program has provided more than $30 million to support over 300 research projects and has served as a catalyst for the study of cardiovascular disease, cancer, sexually transmitted disease, and other conditions that matter for women. Now, $30 million may not seem like a lot when you look at the budget of NIH, but for FDA, $30 million is a very real commitment in terms of research dollars. But I also, for the congressional staff members here and others that have a voice, remind people about how much more we could do if we had more to support this kind of important research. And I know that Marcia's going to talk more about research and its importance to the Office of Women's Health later. I also want to underscore that the Office of Women's Research has really done an important job in helping to expand our communications and outreach to women on these issues, building partnerships with other government agencies, with retailers and industry, with national organizations, with patient and consumer groups, and with other important stakeholders to provide millions of women with FDA safety and other information. And one very important area of development in which we continue to progress is providing guidance to industry on the greater inclusion of women in clinical trials and the evaluation of sex differences in this clinical research. We know that there have been concerns, and very appropriately so, from women's groups and from others, that women were underrepresented in clinical trials to support marketing applications for medical products. And so last year, Congress asked us to look at the inclusion trends for demographic subgroups, including women, and whether subgroup-specific safety and effectiveness data were adequately available. And in fact, the good news is that we found that women make up, on average, about half of the participation in clinical research studies that support drug applications. Those numbers were not so robust in the device area, suggesting that we still have work in a very targeted and aggressive way in that arena. And of course, there is more to be done on the drug development side, including ongoing work with industry and with the academic biomedical research community, as well as with others. But I want to mention that with respect to devices, where there is this clear need and where we know we can make a difference, and a difference, I think, relatively quickly. The Center for Devices just recently released a guidance document to help industry enhance inclusion and the evaluation of sex-specific differences in the studies that they use in their applications for products. And I suspect that all of you probably know that we also just recently issued an action plan on Section 907 of the FDA Safety and Innovation Act law, what we call FDASIA. And this, I think, is an important plan. It's going to be a dynamic plan, updated as we learn more and do more and identify new opportunities for action. But it outlines a number of key recommendations to ensure that we'll provide additional opportunities to ensure equality in the representation of demographic subgroups, including by sex. And the Office of Women's Health is taking on several of the action items, including a campaign to promote the the participation by women in clinical trials. But this is hardly the whole story. I think that FDA's impact on women's health much more broadly can be seen in the work that's done all across the agency, often catalyzed or coordinated by the Office of Women's Health. But really, so many components of FDA are doing important work that has particular benefits to women, as well as, of course, helping to better promote and protect the health of all our citizens. And I just want to mention a few examples of continuing progress in these realms. It's striking that back in 1996, for example, our agency approved a product for use in pap smears that really revolutionized the detection of cervical cancer. That was a great advance. But 10 years later, we approved the first vaccine for the actual prevention of cancer and the devastating complications. We also have approved advances in breast imaging, including 3D breast tomosynthesis, and I had a mammogram yesterday, and also automated screening ultrasound. We've seen the development of the latest generation of cardiac synchronization therapy devices, products that our own FDA scientists were able to show are especially beneficial to women who experience heart failure. We pressed to make sure that important reproductive health products, including Plan B, were available to those who would benefit from their use. And perhaps not quite so pressing, but still important, FDA scientists are working hard to ensure the safety and accurate and appropriate claims on cosmetics, including wrinkle creams and other things, and also have developed important new tools, including a method for validating, assessing the levels of lead in lipstick and other cosmetic products, which, does matter. Shortly before the Office of Women's Health was established, the Mammography Equality Standards Act was enacted. And as we started to get into oversight in this area, we realized how important that act was in order to ensure that women have access to quality mammography for the detection of breast cancer in its earliest and most treatable stages. When we started in this area, there were, in fact, very wide variations in mammography across facilities. But now radiation doses have generally decreased, while the image of mammograms has improved in quality. And this has really been an important contribution of the FDA working in concert with other important partners and, of course, led by the work of Congress. I think all of these achievements reflect important work, scientific and medical care advances, and also an increased understanding that women's health must expand to include a broad range of health issues that impact women and across the life spectrum. Issues such as maternal health, contraception, and breast cancer are extremely important. We all recognize that, but historically, too often it was a subset women's health concerns that really were the focus of attention and what most people meant when they said women's health. We realize that that does a disservice to the important health needs of women. We need to continue to work on and advance those critical arenas, but we also have to look at all of the issues, health issues that impact women and their quality of life. And we know that, in fact, some of the greatest burdens of disease and disability and preventable death for women lie in domains that many have not traditionally thought of as being women's health issues. And, of course, I'm talking about heart disease in particular. But it's been important, I think, very important, that over the years, both within FDA and beyond, we've really broadened our focus to raise perceptions and increase research on chronic diseases, including diabetes, depression, and osteoporosis, as well as other infectious disease and disease conditions that, in fact, represent a huge burden for women, but where the particular issues for women and their health have not always been recognized and adequately addressed. So taking these subjects and conditions seriously, both in terms of treatment and prevention, has really saved lives and has vastly improved the quality of women's lives. And I think that some of this transformation is the result of changes in approach and attitudes. Certainly some of it relates to the advances in science and technology as well. And for the FDA, building on all of that, I think that our focus on FDA as a science-based regulatory agency with a mission to promote and protect the health of the public has made a huge difference. Our ability and our efforts to really ensure that we can develop and understand the evidence and supporting data that we need to find answers to critical questions for women and for all Americans and beyond is essential, and it's often underappreciated, our role in terms of advancing important science. I think that one of the things that I'm most proud of as FDA Commissioner, though many still sort of wonder what I'm talking about, is the focus on regulatory science. The recognition that we have to continue to expand our understanding of critical domains of science that really make the difference between having an opportunity in science, an important discovery that can make a difference, and translating that into a real-world product for people in need. And I think that we have seen that the ability to have that scientific knowledge, to have the new tools to assess safety, efficacy, quality, and performance of products has really made a difference and has been able to help better deliver on the promise of science. The area of women's health, I certainly believe, is a critical area of focus and action today and looking forward. That's why I'm really delighted by the leadership that the Office of Women's Health has brought over now 2 decades to strengthening the science that is the foundation of all that we do at FDA, the science and the data that has to underpin every decision that we make. It takes hard work, persistence, planning, and strategy, but it's what we have to fight for. It's what we have to represent. And I think the Office of Women's Health has been at the center of these efforts, as it has also done such a terrific job to ensure that not only is the right science done so that we can do the right thing for the public that we serve, but making sure that FDA has a strong voice in those efforts and is always thinking about how do we best communicate what we know to the people who need to use that information in order to improve their health and address disease conditions that they experience. So it is really very meaningful to be here today to recognize the 20 years of progress that this office has been able to really guide and push, to recognize the people that have made a contribution to these efforts over time, and to reaffirm our commitment and conviction about what needs to be done going forward. And I thought I might close with a quote from Malala Yousafzai. I don't know if I pronounced that quite right, but we all know her as Malala, the brave young Pakistani woman who stood up to the Taliban. And in this moment of very complex international relations, somehow it seems appropriate to quote her. She said, "I raise up my voice not so I can shout, but so that those without a voice can be heard. We cannot succeed when half of us are held back." So with those words and that inspiration, I want to turn over the podium to another woman of real conviction, Marcia Henderson.
Good afternoon. What a great day this is. And I want to thank you, Cindy Hall and Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, for giving us this opportunity to celebrate and to reminisce, and as Dr. Hamburg has said, renew our commitment to women's health. Leadership makes all the difference. And I have to say, Dr. Hamburg, you have always given full attention and support to women's health issues. And in addition to that, I would also say you've been unwavering. That has not always been the case, and we greatly appreciate it. Because leadership makes such a difference, I would be remiss if I did not recognize my predecessors, Dr. Ruth Merkatz, Dr. Susan Wood, Audrey Shepard, and Dr. Kathleen Ewell. Collectively, you have charted a course for this office with great intelligence, compassion, and sometimes courage. You have led the way to new regulations and guidance for industry, created a national education network to reach women where they live and work with FDA product information, and partnered with others internally and externally to generate support for our critical mission. And yes, they've led us through many controversies, whether it was HIV/AIDS, toxic shock, folic acid, breast implants, hormone replacement, lead in lipstick, bisphosphonates, HPV, or contraception. Our office was there. It was always there, and for this, I say thank you. I would also be remiss if I did not mention my supervisor, my day-to-day manager, Dr. Stephen Ostroff, the chief scientist for the FDA, and my incredible staff. Could you please stand? I appreciate you, Dr. Ostroff, for never saying no, and to the Office of Women's Health for always saying yes. It has allowed us to continue to be thought leaders and innovators, and it's my pleasure to always be in partnership with you. Now, we've had no GPS to guide us. There were many bumps and bends and forks in the road. But together we've figured it out and become what I consider a force for sex analysis and regulatory science, professional training, and consumer education for women's health. 20 years, it's been a long time, and we've come a long way. When our legislation first passed, many at FDA thought OWH should sunset in 1 year, but we're still here. We're still here because we know that the inclusion of women in clinical trials is not only important, but because our office and our mission have evolved to meet new challenges, and we've demonstrated our ability to make a difference. The Office of Women's Health has made a difference. During my time today, I want to tell you about 3 main ways in which we work to make a difference at FDA and in the everyday lives of women. I will also point out ways that we hope you will continue to work with us in the future and so that we can continue this progress. First, OWH has elevated the importance of research and analysis of sex differences in women's health conditions throughout the lifespan. OWH-funded research has directly led to important advances in women's health and specific FDA regulatory actions, including new guidance, product withdrawals, labeling changes, whether it's contraceptives and dietary supplements like St. John's wort, and improved standards such as research around breast implant ruptures. Since 1994, the OWH has funded over 300 intramural research projects with some extramural research collaborations. Cardiovascular disease, the #1 cause of mortality for both women and men, has been our top research priority. We funded research for early investigation of drug-induced heart arrhythmia that could be fatal, especially in women. Specific drugs were withdrawn as a result from the market, and FDA policy changed. We didn't stop there. As science and innovation have evolved, so have we. So now OWH is funding research to learn more about QT prolongation that we hope will lead to new guidance and better solutions. In addition to heart disease, we've also made it a point to fund research projects and workshops in over 20 therapeutic areas, covering women's health across the lifespan. As a result of our funding, FDA reviewers and OWH scientists have contributed approximately 290 scientific journal publications. But is this enough? To answer the question, I asked our team, what have we learned? We've done a lot, but what have we learned? Have we made an impact? Are we going in the right direction? So in 2015, we will release our new Office of Women's Health research roadmap. Using a 3-pronged strategy, we will set the future agenda direction for all OWH research funding. We will elevate regulatory, we will not only review the portfolio of science that we have already developed, we will be performing a gap analysis based on the health needs of women and FDA's ongoing regulatory questions. We will link this into a strategy that will be a multi-year investment of our resources using internal and external partners to reach our goals. We will be reaching out to some of your organizations to vet the research roadmap, and so we look forward to hearing from you to also get your input about our future research direction. Since sex differences are not unique to the United States, we will also be working with our international partners. For example, we have an MOU with the Karolinska Institute Center for Gender Medicine in Sweden, and we will use them to help us build a better understanding of sex differences through the shared information of data which they gain using their cradle-to-grave databases and registries. The second thing we will be doing is we will continue to educate women and health professionals. While research is important, we know we need to do more. When I first came to FDA to lead our outreach efforts, someone at FDA said, FDA can approve the perfect product, but it doesn't make any difference if people don't know how to use them. So we launched the Take Time to Care program to increase women's access to FDA's health information. And we made sure that we would deliver it through conduits that would reach them where they live and work. We started with a safe medication campaign, and over the years, our consumer education has now been developed into over 40 topics and in 20 languages. We've been called a lot of things. One is edge runners. We've been called edge runners because we kept pushing the envelope to come up with new ways to reach women. How did we do it? We did everything from working with Las Vegas casinos to creating a Spanish language soap opera to being a yearly feature in the Dear Abby column, all to reach women where they live and work. We helped to launch FDA's voyage into social media by being one of the first to tweet and to establish Pinterest pages. And we also continue to do traditional outreach, working with community health centers, libraries, and women's clubs. We know that we have reached over 50 million people, but that does not include the other organizations that have chosen to reprint our materials and distribute them independently. Through it all, we've learned to judge our success not just by the millions that we have reached with our brochures, but to listen to real women. We knew we had made a difference when we received a letter from Mrs. Carl Thomas from Clarksville, Tennessee. She told us that our My Medicines brochure helped to save her life. Carl, you see, had been a volunteer at her local library. She had no history of heart disease in her family, but like so many other women, she started to feel very ill. She was taken to the hospital, and when she arrived, she was unconscious. When she was able to speak and be alert, her doctor said, "You know what? That list was very important. It caused me to change my treatment regimen." I wish everyone would carry this type of list. After her recovery, she sent us a letter asking for dozens of our My Medicines brochures. I quote, "Women should carry one of these in their purses and keep a spare in their car. Believe me, it can save your life." Whether we are reaching just one woman like Carl or targeting thousands at our outreach events, we have done it all through partnerships. We can't recognize each of you here today, but we have a short video to highlight the impact you have helped us make in the communities in which we serve.
Sometimes I think about what would have happened if we hadn't established the Office of Women's Health. And I think about that in terms of a missed opportunity to really reach out to women across the nation to provide information to them about their health, an opportunity to learn more scientifically about how our drugs or our biologics or our devices work in women as well as in men, because women are different from men, and there are many reasons scientifically to explore how our differences will impact the safety and efficacy of our drugs, devices, and biologics. To me, that's a major accomplishment and one that we're all very proud of.
The Society for Women's Health Research actually has worked with the Office of Women's Health at the FDA for many years, actually going on 20 or 25 years. The last few years have been the most exciting and successful. In 2011, we co-sponsored a 2-day meeting with academia, scientists, community leaders, pharmaceutical industry, and the FDA and ourselves, of course, and advocates, looking at diversifying clinical trials and strategies to reach out to women and minorities. As a result of that, we published a white paper and basically educates principal investigators how to better recruit women and minorities, and also tell pharmaceutical companies when they apply for approvals for their medications the requirements that they have to have in order to get approval has to show that there are women or minorities where it's justifiable, which is most of the time, except for those trials, obviously, that are just related to men. So we were very excited about that. We're still working with the FDA, and we actually testified in April, again on this issue, expanding some of the recommendations in terms of what needs to be changed. And we're planning on having another meeting, follow-up meeting to the one in 2011, most likely in January or February of next year.
When the Office of Women's Health first approached the NACDS Foundation, we didn't realize then that we were really on the cutting edge of really a tremendous education outreach program targeting people who'd been under-focused, women as the caregiver and the family gatekeeper when it comes to health. One of the first things we talked about is what would we feel would be the most effective way to communicate with women. And we did focus group research, and we found that they wanted something that was simple but easy to keep around, handy in the purse. And that's why we developed the Take Time to Care brochure that's very small and fit easily into a woman's purse or handbag. It was a primer on things to ask the pharmacist about medicine use, as well as a way to keep a record of all the medicines they and their family were using. MyMeds campaign was an effort to reach out through 30,000 community pharmacies, traditional chain drugstores, those that are in supermarkets and those in the mass merchants, with useful information for women about critical diseases. We started first with diabetes, and then the program grew into other disease states. I think one of the greatest aspects of the relationship between the NACDS Foundation and the Office of Women's Health is that we established a true partnership. Not only did it go beyond the Take Time to Care medicine education program and the diabetes awareness program, but it blossomed into other avenues of interaction that help maximize the ability of pharmacists to help educate patients through useful information, many times provided by the FDA's Office of Women's Health.
Well, we were fortunate to form the partnership with the Office of Women's Health after they had also worked with our counterparts in medicine, nursing, dentistry. And they knew that pharmacy needed curricular resources to enhance the education of faculty and students in the care of women and their health. And that's how the partnership came to be. That first initiative was about 10 years ago. And it resulted in a wonderful toolkit of resources that faculty could integrate into required and elective courses in the area of women's health. And then recognizing that healthcare changes with time, we've recently rebooted the partnership and have come up with updated materials and resources for faculty. The materials help faculty navigate to the most evidence-based resources that they can use to integrate into their courses, into their teaching and learning. The toolkit is really significant in that I would estimate that it has the potential to touch the lives of millions of women and their children over the course of the lives of the pharmacists who will learn through the collaboration with the FDA how to put the best evidence into the care of the women that the pharmacists serve.
The FDA Office of Women's Health was looking for an opportunity to extend their reach in getting to the Latino community. They had already developed a Nunca Más Telenovela platform, which was very successful, but they wanted to take that and multiply its reach. So they approached the National Healthy Mothers to Healthy Babies Coalition and the Texture Baby program to think about a natural partnership between the two. And the partnership started to form around how to connect women around Texture Baby and safe medication use. Texture Baby is the largest mobile service in the country. We have been able to reach over 740,000 individuals since we launched in February 2010. Our service really is a powerful tool because we're able to communicate sensitive information to moms during the time of pregnancy and the first year of their baby's life for free, and it's delivered directly on their text message. And that's the beauty of it, that it's powerful, it's immediate, and it's within their reach. In the last couple of years, what we've done is they've extended their support to develop an innovative partnership to bring a video in a telenovela format in both English and Spanish to raise awareness about the Texture Baby service, as well as to raise awareness about the FDA's pregnancy registry.
I've had a wonderful career with many opportunities, but when I think of the years I spent at FDA, the opportunity that I had to establish that Office of Women's Health in collaboration with wonderful colleagues, I think of that opportunity as the highlight of my career.
Wasn't that a terrific video? You know, we do all of this in-house, and so I have to thank my incredible staff again, and the studio at CDRH. They did all of this independently, and it was great, and I thank you for that. But most importantly, I thank you for your partnerships. We couldn't have made this video without having some substance to put in it, and that's just a hint of a few of the partnerships that we have established over time. Now, one of our other major priorities, as you know, is that we conduct in-house assessments of how well we're doing. We try to determine how close we're getting to our target, because as you all know, our primary reason for being established was to try to elevate the number of women in clinical trials as well as the analysis of it. And so today, I am happy to say that women now represent up to 53.4% of our clinical trial participants in our new drug approvals. And we've looked to see that this is actually a trend. The range is within that scope, typically within that scope. And today we can also say that, I quote, FDA expects our reviewers and pharmaceutical companies to routinely look at sex differences in their new drug applications. When findings suggest there are sex-based safety issues that we need to report that are important, we work with companies to put that information in labeling. That is today's facts. It wasn't always the case. Yes, we've made a lot of progress, but we always ask ourselves, is this enough? And at your insistence, we led the agency in the development of the FDASIA 907 data report, and we also sat in this year on the committee that developed the action plan. And we're already staffing and providing support for its implementation. As one of my astute colleagues said at FDA, the action plan will be a game changer. With new reviewer training and historic levels of transparency, it will be a game changer. But is that enough? I once had a professor say to the class, the absence of data is not an answer. Who are these women? We have women in clinical trials, but who are they? Well, one thing that the report said was the entire group of people in clinical trials are typically white. And we don't know much more about them. Just as women are not like men, all women are not the same. There's great diversity among women. As we move closer to using genetics, we must also have clinical trials with diverse populations. We need a mix of races and ethnicities, ages, and women who are disabled or have comorbidities. So with this said, we will be partnering with our colleagues at NIH to start an initiative that will promote more diversity of women in clinical trials. We plan to create a network that will elevate the issue of the inclusion of women in clinical trials. We will educate patients and health professionals about the importance of clinical trials, and we're going to engage everyone in the conversation. We've learned over the years that we should always come to you before we get started, because you have special experience, expertise, and insights. And so before we launch our new project, we will be coming to you for your help. We'll be knocking on your doors. So as I end my remarks today, I want to extend an invitation for all of you to join with us to help us continue to distribute our consumer material, but also to start the conversation. We plan to hold conversations with women across the country so that they will be interested in entering clinical trials. We know that we can do better. We already have.
Thank you both. I'm a little overwhelmed by all the information, and I know everyone here probably learned something new about what you all are doing. It's really quite a rich history, and moving forward, you have a very ambitious agenda. So another hand for what is happening. Like all of our speakers today, our next speaker needs no introduction. As I said earlier, Ambassador and former Congresswoman Connie Morella. Currently Ambassador in Residence at American University, Connie Morella served as U.S. Ambassador to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris, not a bad assignment, from 2003 to 2007. She represented Maryland's 8th Congressional District in Congress from 1987 to 2003. And during her tenure, as all of you know, she was a champion for women's health, and she certainly was a champion for this office, as was mentioned earlier, and was co-chair of the Women's Caucus in the 104th Congress. And before I turn it over, most of you also know she was my boss for 12 years.
Boy, I had good taste, didn't I, in picking a legislative director? Well, as you heard, I'm Connie Morella, and I approve this message. And the message is to thank Women's Policy, Inc. for doing this. They do some wonderful programs, and this is one of the highlights, Cindy Hall. You and your staff have been great. Robert Wood Johnson, thanks for always being there to help with the kind of support that is necessary to put these on. And I'm here for the big celebration, because this is the 20th year celebration of the Office of Women's Health at FDA, Food and Drug Administration. And, you know, when I was in Congress, Charlie Cook, who is a constituent, you know, the Cook report, you know, he said, oh, that Morella, she knows her district. She will go to the opening of an envelope. Well, shortly after that, when I saw him, I said, and now, Charlie, I can only go to those openings that I want, and that's why I'm here today, because this is so very special to have this celebration of an organization that's done so much, women's health. Well, I don't have any speech to prepare or to give. Cindy just said, oh, I'm going to put you on the program. So now that she is the boss, I said, oh, okay, Cindy, but I really don't, because I associate myself with the remarks that the speakers have made. So you see, you can always say, she agrees. I would have said that, you know. But quite seriously, I am proud of the achievements that have been made and looking into the future in terms of watching what you've said is the roadmap for the future. But I just want to do a little flashback, because actually representing the National Institutes of Health and Food and Drug Administration, it was early on when we had GAO reports. First of all, there was a commission that looked at what was happening with women in terms of promotions and being involved in research, and then a GAO report which said NIH flunked it. I mean, they really were not doing what they should. And then some meetings at NIH with Bill Robb, who was then the acting director. And it was bipartisan because it had, Olympia Snow was part of it. She couldn't be there that particular day, but it had Barbara Mikulski, Pat Schroeder, and myself. So it was bicameral and bipartisan. And they said, yeah, we're doing all of this. But then, just like the Office of Women's Health at FDA, we needed to get something in legislation to make sure. So that happened in 1993. And yes, indeed, it's made a difference. Vivian Penn, the first director. Susan Wood was helping work on that legislation at that particular time. And a lot of you are here. See, I feel that I'm here in a room of giants. I truly mean that. Each and every one of you has contributed so much that I really feel pretty minor in that whole lineup, tier. And you've got, the commissioners of the directors of the Office of Women's Health at FDA. I think that's pretty significant that they are all here. I see Phyllis Greenberger, who with her Society for Women's Health Research was very much involved with the Office of Women's Health at FDA. And so then another report was done by GAO, and they said, hey, FDA is fallen behind. Something more needs to be done. And then you got the genesis and the whole development of the Office of Women's Health at FDA, which has made a big difference. Cindy, always, she's my boss, but she's also a staffer still. Once you're a staffer, you're always a staffer. So she pulled from a file and left for me here at where I was sitting. This is to the Honorable Constance Moreller, and it is, I am pleased to advise you of the establishment of the Office of Women's Health in the Office of External Affairs, Food and Drug Administration on July 28, 1994. And then it goes on to explain it. So I don't know of anybody who keeps those kinds of meticulous records like that. I always say, be careful what you say on the internet, because there's nothing that is ever trash or removed. But when you actually have the paper to show it, that's pretty significant. Well, we found out a lot of things from women's studies. We found out, of course, cardiovascular disease is #1 killer, and yet we weren't looking at that at all. We weren't looking how to seek it out. And I like the concept that every cell has a sex, and it's not Republican or Democrat. And I think that's a very good point to think. None of these diseases are hitting Republicans or Democrats more or less, whatever. And so I think that certainly is the most nonpartisan situation that we have. And lung cancer, until the research was all done, I didn't realize that was the leading cancer when you think of breast cancer and ovarian cancer, that lung cancer was the leading killer of women. And depression, we still hear a lot about that, about how depression affects women far more than men. And again, research needs to be done about how we can handle that we know that. And just recently, we saw something about Alzheimer's. Newspapers were writing about Alzheimer's hitting women more than men, despite the fact that women live longer. And so, HIV/AIDS, I'm still waiting for that microbicide. I had legislation in years ago, and they keep saying 5 years, 5 years, 5 years. But eventually I know it will happen, and it will have more than just keeping HIV/AIDS from letting women be the ones who are empowered with it, but it will have to do with, connect with contraception probably too. But we know that more research needs to be done in terms of the pharmaceuticals, and you've got representation here also. Remember that program that Leslie Stahl did on Ambien, and we don't think about dosage making a big difference in the lives of people. So all I want to say is keep it up. I noticed also NIH now starting October 1st is going to include, to make sure that plans for balancing male and female cells and animals is going to be mandated in their preclinical studies. So in other words, those rats, they'll even have to find some female rats. That's going to be hard to do, but I think eventually. So I'm delighted to hear about the roadmap. I'm delighted to hear about the progress you're making. I think Dr. Hamburg is absolutely incredible. I know her history from New York and what she's done here. Dr. Henderson, boy, you're a firebrand. Your presentation was superb. And in terms of the action that you get, too, it's really great. So I'm going to say thank you to all of you. I'm glad you're going to be partnering with NIH, too. And from everything I needed to know about life I learned in kindergarten, Remember that book was popular a long time ago? There's a line I like. It's like, and so when you go out into the world, watch out for traffic, hold hands, and stick together. And that's exactly what we need to do as a result of that. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Connie. It's always a pleasure to have you wrap things up, but we're not quite done. We're not quite done. In her usual amazing timing, and I can say this because she's been the co-chair of the Women's Caucus now for 2 years, Congresswoman Donna Edwards has just walked in. The perfect way to end this event. She is serving her 4th term representing the 4th District of Maryland and is ranking member of the Science, Space, and Technology Subcommittee on Space, and also serves on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. And I think most of us know, most of you all know that she's a co-founder and former executive director of the National Network to End Domestic Violence, which has done such amazing work. And she's always been a strong women's health advocate. And is FDA in your district now or it used to be? Oh. Okay. Congresswoman Donna Edwards.
Thank you. And thank you all so much for being here today. And I always love it when I can come in a room and say, my Congresswoman is here, Connie Morella. I spent many years voting for her, and so it would have been great to serve with you, but then I think that might have meant that we couldn't, whatever. But it's great to be here, and also for Women Policy, Inc., for the leadership and guidance of the Bipartisan Women's Caucus. Thank you as well. And really celebrating 20 years of the Office of on Women's Health at the FDA. We just really appreciate the great work, tremendous work that's really been done. And those of us who spent many years, and I did, outside of Congress in the advocacy community, greatly appreciate the work that's been done, the attention that's really been paid in a unique way to women's health concerns. It's been, quite a 20-year journey. The question, I think, for those of us who are members of Congress is, can we keep that journey up? Can we really expand what we're doing in terms of thinking about women's health so that it really becomes a part of the way we think about our overall health? I think that's what many of us would want. Over the past 20 years, the Office of Women's Health has made sure that advancing the health and well-being of women is really a top priority for the federal government. We know that understanding health conditions that are unique to women ensures that research initiatives and regulatory decision-making are accurately reflecting the needs of our constituents. As an African-American woman, I know the importance, the absolute importance in understanding the dynamics of health concerns that are particular to a race or an ethnicity that is part and parcel of the way that we need to begin to think about women's health concerns in an integrated way, and one that understands our various communities, one that also takes an approach to public awareness and engagement that factors in those unique considerations that we have in diverse communities. The Office of Women's Health has made tremendous progress since 1994, and it's not over. And, the leadership that we have, Dr. Hamburg, Marcia Henderson, longtime friend, long before any of this, like Congress stuff, and so it's kind of great. It's great to be able to see you here as well. And as a member of the Women's Caucus, I just want you to know how committed we are in the caucus. The Women's Caucus is committed across the lines. So much gets, done, not done around here that's about Republicans and Democrats fighting about something or other. And what we understand as women members of the Bipartisan Women's Caucus is that it's important for us to maintain equal footing, level footing, and a working relationship on both sides of the aisle that really understand these unique needs. And I think you find that in the Women's Caucus. My good friend Connie Morella knows that because you started us all off. And you know how important it is on so many of these concerns for us to have strong bipartisan support that is often led by the women members of Congress, and that we find our home in this Women's Caucus. We have to make a stronger commitment to ensure adequate funding for medical research, for research that can help us better understand the health disparities between men and women, but among, as I said before, underrepresented populations, to minimize the risks that young women and girls will face when they encounter health issues that many women have today. And earlier this week, going in to get my annual mammogram physical and all those things, something I'd put off for 6 months because it didn't work for the schedule. Not good. We don't want women doing those things. And in the course of that, I mean, I think one of the things that I heard and I hear all the time, just sort of sitting in the in the room, which is very grounding as a member of Congress in your district doing these things. And so sitting there with a group of women who spanned an age range, and some of the women talking about how their mothers and sisters had never really had access to annual mammograms, annual physicals, looking at their various health concerns and how they had lost their lives. And I think the importance of an Office on Women's Health that understands the value of investing in women's health and the value in all of our communities, cutting across generations, and making certain that we do the things that we need to do from a research perspective that ensures that women's health concerns and needs are met, and that we can't just be the caregivers and the nurturers, that every once in a while we require a little bit of caregiving and nurturing ourselves. And so thank you very much, and thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Edwards. That was a perfect way to end this event, and we are right on time. I want to thank Commissioner Hamburg and Marcia Henderson for their many years of work on behalf of women's health. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you to all the former directors as well. Thank you to everyone in this room while we're at it, since pretty much all of you are champions in here. We also thank the women senators, members, and former members who worked so hard on behalf of the office, and many of you in the audience, as I just mentioned, who were advocates. I also want to reiterate our appreciation to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for their support for this Women's Health series, and our thanks also to the congressional co-sponsors and their staff. Finally, my thanks to the FDA Office of Women's Health staff, as have been thanked previously, and to Cheryl Williams and Claudia Umania from Women's Policy Inc. for their hard work on this briefing to make it possible. Thank you for joining us. Let's have one last hand for this fabulous